Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. So Rise of Shadows is coming out relatively soon, and there's going to be a lot of card reviews, a lot of that kind of stuff, and I wanted to structure mine out of the get-go here to give you guys a good idea about what to expect from the power levels of all the different cards that we see. Now, I've already reviewed a few of the cards because they were part of the original announcement, but today's first review is going to set the structure for the star system that I will be using for this expansion's cards, and well, I'll actually be rating the cards, not just talking about what they do. So the rating system for this expansion I think is very fitting because we're going to have massive change. Beforehand, we always took into account what decks from the previous meta would persist and how those cards would interact with the previous meta. That's not going to happen this time around. Basically, every good deck is going to be absolutely annihilated by the standard rotation because most of the extremely powerful cards that we've been playing for the last year are from the expansions released 2 years ago. They're the ones cycling out. We're going to have a brand new meta. It will basically be close to impossible to accurately guess what decks are going to make it and what won't, because we're not just getting one new expansion. We're getting a chance to look again at all of the cards that we've not been playing with but have been released for the last year. As a result, my rating system will generally be based on the power level of the cards themselves with, the consideration for what they would need to work out. Because a lot of people, they get a card and they don't necessarily need to know how good it is at that very point in time. They need to know how good it might be, maybe even in the next expansion, how Blizzard will be moving things around then. So this is the rating system. It's a 5-star potential rating system. Cards that receive 1 star have no chance. They are the absolute garbage cards of the expansion. There's always some of these, and well, hopefully there's not going to be that many this time around. A 2-star card needs a lot of help. It's not hopeless, it's not a no-chance card, but it needs a lot of help. It needs a lot of synergy, it needs a lot of things to go its way in the meta. Perhaps there's an extremely slow and powerful rogue card, but rogue has a bit of a challenge in getting to the late game. It needs a lot of help. It needs meta help, it needs card help, it needs a lot of things to work out for these cards to be any use. 3-star cards are good and they need a little bit of help. They are not quite strong cards, but they're pretty good and just need a little bit of a boost, need a few things to work out for them to see play. 4-star cards are just strong cards. They're just good cards that you would consider whenever you're making a deck. You'd look at these cards again and again to see if they fit in your deck. 5-star cards are insanely strong / meta cards. Cards that could define how the game will be played in the next cycle or two. So that's the rating system. Let's get started. The first few, I'm going to do these in chronological order, so you have seen these, but maybe you haven't seen quite what I think about them in terms of power levels. The first one is Archvillain Rafam. He is a guy who has a strong presence on the board right away. He's got taunt, he's huge, and he makes your deck insanely high value. We also see that there's a lot of value-oriented play from the few bits that we've seen in this expansion, plus what's going out of the game. So value is actually going to be more important from the look of it so far. So Archvillain Rafam is certainly a very strong card. Will it be meta-defining? I don't think it's going to build up Warlock by itself, but it's certainly a very strong card. As such, I rate him 4 stars. Forbidden Words is the new priest cards, kind of like the forbidden cards of the Whispers of the Old Gods. It spends all your mana to destroy a minion with that much attack or less. I compared it to Shadow Word Pain because Shadow Word Pain is 2 mana for 3 or less. So Forbidden Words, if you kill something with 2 or 1 attack, it's as good or better than Shadow Word Pain. It's only worse than Shadow Word Pain if you need to kill something with 3, and then it's just 1 more mana. It's not that big of a difference. A lot of the time with Priest, use Shadow Word Pain on turn 3 or 4, or much later even. It also doubles up as being a way better card later on, because it can also remove large minions later on. It also is a 0 mana cost spell, and what history has taught me in Hearthstone is that you never never ever underestimate spells that cost 0 mana. There's just so much natural synergy with these cards that you never count them out. So I would say Forbidden Words is an extremely strong card, not just strong. Forbidden Words for me gets 5 stars. You'll never go wrong putting this card in your priest deck. The new rogue card, E.V.I.L Miscreant, is a 3-cost 1/5 that introduced us to the lackey system. I'm not going to go over too much into the lackey system, especially because they said that they will be releasing new lackeys as the game progresses in the following year. But what we have seen consistently from the lackeys that we will currently have initially is that they are generally 1 mana minions that 1 mana cost minions that should be valued around 2 mana cost minions. So even though this is a 3-cost 1/5, you get 2 lackeys. So you kind of get 2 mana back once you get those lackeys. With Rogue playing cards like these, it's always a bit of a challenge to combo them out. So even though this card can be very good, it's going to need some help, and it's going to need some help in activating the combos and putting consistent use to those lackeys. So with some help required, E.V.I.L Miscreant gets a 3-star rating for me. Not too bad. Hagath's Scheme is the new Shaman board clear. It does 1 damage and it introduces the scheme mechanic. So each turn it upgrades. If this is in your hand 1 turn, it does 1 damage. If it stayed there from the last turn, 2 damage. 3, 4, 5, all the way up. Right? You can have a game with over 40 turns, so you can deal over 40 damage to all the minions. One thing I have to say is that the scheme mechanic may look a little bit stronger than it really is, because Hearthstone, we're like 5 years into the game right now, more even. A lot of people use game assisting tools when they play Hearthstone. Card trackers are actually capable of determining card age in your opponent's hand. So they will know if they use one of these popular deck trackers if you've been holding onto a card for like 10 turns, and they will know that it will be 10 turns and not 11 turns. So it is actually a lot easier to play around these cards with the deck tracking tools, and a lot of people use these deck tracking tools. So with that in mind, considering the play that most people will have, not like extreme level tournament play, I consider that. I think this is a very powerful card, but I can't quite give it the meta-defining rating. I have to give it 4 stars. Just a very strong card that you'll consider when you're building any Shaman deck, especially control-related Shaman decks. New Druid spell, the Forest's Aid, is a twin spell. The twin spell basically gives you another copy of the card without twin spell after you play the first. So basically you get to cast it twice. That's about it. It's very straightforward. It's a very powerful card. You get 5 2/2s, which is certainly worth 8 mana, but most Druid decks that utilize a swarm of minions try to win before turn 8. So this card standalone is not really going to do the trick. It's a very powerful card, but it does not fit in what we see as a successful token Druid deck. As such, it is going to need some help. This is a pretty good card. It's a 3-star card in my mind. I think a lot of people are going to have success with this card in Arena, but that's because games in Arena are generally stretched out a little bit longer than they are in Constructed. Chef Nomi is the first neutral legendary that we saw. It's quite an interesting card, 7-cost 6/6 that fills your board with 6/6 elementals if you have no cards in your deck. Now, if you have no cards in your deck currently, and even in the next expansion, there will be combos that just straight out kill your opponent. So if your goal is to get to no cards in your deck, it's kind of difficult to see this card as a reliable option. It's still very good though, because a lot of board clears are actually exiting the standard format, so once this card hits play, it's more of a win condition than it may look like in this current metagame. As such, Chef Nomi his effect is quite strong, and the main consideration that I had with this is with academic espionage. If you play an extremely draw-heavy rogue deck, you can play your Chef Nomi and then fill your deck right back up. With that consideration, it's maybe a little bit better, but I think the card still needs a lot more help. The classes that utilize this card, they kind of struggle to make it to the late game. So Chef Nomi, in my mind, is a 2-star card, needs quite a lot of help, but who knows? he might get it. It's a very interesting mechanic, and Hearthstone right now is currently quite pushing the limits as to what's possible in the game. Kalecgos, new mage legendary, 10 cost 4/12 dragon, discovers a spell, and the first spell you play every turn costs 0. So you have to make sure that you do not coin out Kalecgos. Kalecgos is straight up a 10 mana cost play. No cheating, alright? You play this on turn 10, and you get your spell, and you get to cast your spell if you want. There are a lot of mage spells that might be pretty disappointing, but mage spells are, in my opinion, on the heavy side. So you're typically going to get something quite powerful. And again, one lesson that I've learned through Hearthstone's history is that you never underestimate cards that are strong when you play them and have reoccurring effects throughout the game. Kalecgos is exactly that. Kalecgos is going to be an absolute monster of a win condition. I think of this card as kind of like Ysera, but you play the first card immediately, or another option you have from your hand. That's very attractive when looking at Control Mage. Now, will Control Mage be a thing? I don't know. It's going to be impossible to really tell. But what we can tell is Kalecgos is going to be an absurdly powerful card, warranting a 5-star rating, of course. 5 stars is just natural for a card of this power level. Spell Ward Jeweler is a 3-cost 3/4 with a lower power level that we might expect in the next expansion. That might just be pretty good. We don't really have too many combos that kill your opponent straight away, except for some things in Druid. So, there might not be that combo counter aspect that some people attribute to the card, but the fact that it is a 3-mana 3/4 is something a lot of people have overlooked. It's just a pretty strong card. How good is it going to be? I don't know. It looks kind of like a pack filler to me, but it has the potential to actually counter combo decks and push the Zoo archetype, both of which synergize pretty well in any metagame in my opinion. So I have to give it a pretty solid 3 stars. It doesn't need that much help for it to be a very good card. Just people have to play combo decks. That's about it. Togwaggle Scheme is probably one of the most interesting cards that we've seen so far, revealed from the upcoming Rise of Shadows expansion. It's a very complicated card. It's obviously an extremely powerful card. You save this until the end of the game, 10 turns, 20 turns if you may, and then you get like 10 or 20 copies of an extremely high value minion that can win the game for you. Or, you can synergize off of, the pogo hoppers or whatever. There's lots of comparisons for this card. The main thing with this card is that it is not standalone that strong because, well, Rogue has a bit of a dilemma when it comes to control cards. Rogue has had no shortage of control cards over the years, but it's certainly not been able to competitively use basically any of them. The core problem with Rogue as a class is that it has no survival tools. Rogue has no class taunts. It has no real way to heal properly, at least, or consistently. And it lacks proper board clears that give you considerable amounts of tempo. So with that in mind, it's just very difficult to survive to the late game unless you're playing an aggro or tempo-based deck. And if you're playing an aggro or tempo-based deck and you won the board, then it's just easier and more practical to just kill your opponent. Why stall out to turn 20 when you can just, shift your deck just a little bit to kill him on turn 10. So that's kind of the problem with a lot of these extremely powerful value rogue cards. They will need help. The meta has to be quite a bit slower, or rogue as a class needs considerable help to actually make it to the late game. As far as cards go that are just fun to play, this is going to be at the very top of my list. I think, though, on power level, realistically, we're looking at Togwaggle Scheme being a 3-star card. However, I will be playing a lot of it. You can bet that YouTubers and streamers will be playing a disproportionate amount of this card just because it's so cool. I love this card, but practically speaking, win rate in mind, it still needs some help. Swamp Queen Hagatha is an extremely high value shaman card. It's been a bit controversial because while the effect is very strong, you get a 5/5 guy and you get to choose 2 spells. One of the spells will have a target. You cannot target both of them. My experience with discovery mechanics playing Shaman is that a lot of the spells actually are pretty terrible. So, this card is probably a little bit better than it looks in terms of what the card actually does. However, it's a very high value card, and value looks like it's going to be relevant to game again in the game. So, it's probably going to be a pretty strong card, but we'll really have to see how the rest of the expansion works out to know if we can be playing 7-cost 5/5s with 0 other impacts on the turn you play them. 7-cost 5/5, that's a really bad stat line. I think this card is going to need quite a bit of help, but it's a legendary. With legendaries, I sometimes overtrust, but still I trust Blizzard kind of, does their homework and makes them at least decent. So I'm going to rate this card 3 stars. It honestly deserves a 2-star rating right now, but I give them a little bit of faith because it has the legendary aspect. It's probably just not a pack filler because there's not really that many like pack filler level class legendaries in the game. I'm a little bit optimistic, so I'll give it 3 stars from now. Oblivion, Hunter Legendary, 6-cost 3/4. The Death Rattle summons a mech from your hand and triggers its Death Rattle. Now, this effect is actually extremely powerful. It's a Death Rattle, so this card has to die, but there are still some triggers in Hunter, notably one from the Boomsday Project that triggers the Death Rattle of a mech and buffs it. If you can do that, you can get something like a Whelp out and then trigger the Whelp. That's kind of like a cube level play. And, cube Death Rattle Hunter is kind of a thing right now. Now, it's obviously a little bit weirder and harder to pull off than that. But again, there's going to be a lower power level of cards, value, and more traditional aspects of Hearthstone are going to be important once again. So with that in mind, well, it's not too bad. Now, it still needs we just need more mechs with relevant death rattles. That's the problem with this card. There's not enough targets for this card to be good enough. That's the problem right now. So it certainly needs a lot of help, but this is a card that you should not count out. I think this is a solid 2-star card, but really it can trend all the way up to 5 if we see constant releases of powerful death rattle mechs. It has the potential to be very powerful. Lazuli Scheme. Reduce the attack of an enemy minion by 1 until end of turn, and it upgrades. So if this has been in your hand like 5 turns, you can reduce the attack of something by 5. Now, this goes along with what I've been saying earlier in this video. You never count out 0-cost spells. It's not particularly good with temporary steal effects because, well, it's going to get the attack back, and, if you like Shadow Madness it, you might get a 0-attack minion. So it's a little bit weird with that, but it is quite powerful with Cabal Shadow Priest. And if you have a means to cycle the card, being a 0-cost spell, which again is very powerful, it has a lot of weight in a deck. If you have a schemed up Lazuli Scheme, you basically get a mind control battle cry effect off of your Cabal Shadow Priest. That's ridiculous, right? So the ceiling of what's possible with this card is extremely high. This is an extremely powerful card in that regard, and is synergized with a card from the basic set. So, it's a combo that we'll just have as long as this card is in standard. That's a very big deal. I think, though, there might be some issues with that type of priest seeing play, but most likely, I would bet again on the value side of things so far from what we've seen in these expansions. So Lazuli Scheme, in my mind, is a 5-star card. It's possible that this card might get downgraded a little bit if we see combo rise up, if we see aggro decks rise up a bit. But so far, it's looking very good for priests with Lazuli Scheme. Improve Morale is a very interesting card. It's very similar to Blood to Ichor, I think it was called. It deals 1 damage, and if it doesn't kill it, we get an effect. With Blood to Ichor, we get a 2/2, which is effectively a 1 mana cost card, but you get it for free, so you get it for 0. Right? Now, with Improved Morale, you get a Lackey, which is kind of a 2 mana cost card, but it goes to your hand, so you still have to pay 1 for it. So it's kind of the same. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. Now, people did use Blood Ichor, but this was during a time where, Grim Patron and, OTK decks and all of that sort was certainly a bit more prized and functional, to say the least, than it is today. So it's very difficult for this card to take off the ground. I think it needs some help. It's not a bad card, so it doesn't need a lot of help, but it certainly needs some help. It's going to be a 3-star card. It's going to be a card that if self-damage inflicting mechanics pop up in Warrior, you're going to start looking at this card pretty easily to put in your deck. If you're just looking for an execute trigger on your opponent's minions, I don't think it's quite good enough. Reform Scheme, the Warlock Scheme just spawns the board with a bunch of imps. It's very difficult to understand this card. I feel less certain about rating this card than all of the others because, well, you never really know with zoo decks. Zoo decks, a lot of the time, they play a lot of stuff, and then if they haven't killed their opponent, they're basically scrambling to get Doom Guards, which is not in the game anymore in Standard, by the way, or like Leroy or like Soulfires and stuff, just to push it out. They didn't really have too many tools that filled the board, except in Old Gods, where they had the Forbidden Ritual, I think it was called, that spawned 1/1s and just used up your entire mana pool. It's a very good card, by the way. Reform Scheme has the potential to do that, but it has to sit in your hand for a while. So the consistency and the flow of the zoo deck when considering that is just very difficult to gauge. If there are ever mechanics that buff your minions on the board considerably, Reform Scheme can be an incredible tempo play to put up a real board all of a sudden. In that case, I have to consider that if this card gets a little bit of help, it could be very good. Right now, I think it's a 3-star card, but I think it could also be considered a 2-star card by many people when looking at it. It just doesn't have a natural fit in zoo decks, but with a little bit of help, it might be just right. The last card on the list is the comeback of Omega cards. It's the Omega Devastator. So a warrior card, it's a mech. So, we can get it off Omega Assembly. And if you have 10 crystals, it does 10 damage to a minion. Holy crap. This card is just an absolute monster. I don't know if you guys understand just how insane this card is. This is a late game powerhouse in a meta that is looking to be value oriented. And you can just play it as a 4-drop if you just need to play something against an aggressive deck. It's incredibly good. I think this is possibly the best Omega card that we have seen yet to date. And, well, it's in Warrior, which can certainly make great use out of not only that, but also the mech archetype. In my mind, this is a no-brainer 5-star card. Omega Devastator might just be the future. Hope you guys enjoyed this review. The next reviews will be a decent bit shorter as, we have kind of seen these cards a little bit already. So get ready for those. Make sure you subscribe, stay tuned, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.